And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining me today. So, today is August 6th, 2021. So, we have a lot of things to cover, so let's get started. So here are some topics that we're going to cover in today's live stream. So first is film star Scarlett Johanssen, who is also known in the MC universe as the Black Widow character, who recently released the Black Widow film, which I haven't watched, so I don't know if it's a good film or not, is suing the Disney company. Now, whether that has merit or not, we'll take a look at that. Next is we'll be talking about another beleaguered company now, Activision. For those who are not familiar, or Activision Blizzard is a billion-dollar company known for making the game of World of Warcraft as well as Call of Duty. Is being sued by their workers for having what do you call this, a frat boy culture, which is not conducive for working. So whether that's true or not, we'll take a closer look. Next is will be of all, during difficult times, one would think that, starting a business may not be the best time for about it. But, if there's a need, there's an opportunity, businesses will always find a way to begin. So here we have a company who came up with an idea, an Airbnb style for swimming pools. So stay tuned for that one. Anyway, next we'll be talking about the decline of global smartphone global sales, which is kind of interesting now. Is it because of the pandemic that's been happening, or is it a growing trend not just last year but in previous past? So we'll take a closer look at that one. Next, we'll be talking about Tesla's. There was an accident in one of their facility wherein a Tesla Megapack caught fire. So that's not something you want to happen, because it can be catastrophic in terms of not just the battery catching fire, but the toxic fumes that it generate. We'll talk about that. And finally, some interesting about in sports regarding F1 drivers. So if you're into racing, you might notice those great athletes with the likes of what do you call this, Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, to name a few. How much are they earning? And you'd be surprised on how much they generate revenue or income, and where does it come from? Are they similar to other sports where they can get other endorsement deals to maximize their opportunity of earning much more income? Anyway, so to start off, as I mentioned, so Disney is a very big company, obviously known for producing films like from the MCU, to name a few, and then you have Star Wars franchise and so forth, and other Disney films and so forth. But what's interesting here with the latest release of the Black Widow, the ratings or the box office receipt may be considered tanking in a sense. Now, whether that's good or bad, question here is, if you're a star, in this case Miss Johansson, looking at the numbers, the actress is filing a lawsuit against the studio for releasing the film simultaneously, not just in the movie theaters but as well as the streaming service. Now, there are two sides to that story, meaning obviously for Disney, which have been dealing with the pandemic since last year, are trying to find ways how to maximize or generate more revenue compared to pre-pandemic. Right now, obviously they're trying to target the levels that Avengers Endgame generated into the 1 to 2 billion region, right? Can it be replicated with the other succeeding films? Well, they're trying, right? But that's not beside the point. On the other hand, if you're Miss Johansson here, the concern here is if you're simultaneously releasing the films, it will cannibalize the opportunity to generate more revenue, in this case more box office. If people are given an option to watch it in the cinema or versus at home, makes it more convenient, people would offer to do that. So let's take a closer look here. So as mentioned here, uh, Miss Johanssen is claiming that she was guaranteed an exclusive theatrical release of the film because much of her salary was based to box office performance. So I think it's similar to how Robert Downey Jr. bet on himself that if the film did well in the box office, he gets a percentage on it, which is, I think based on the last film that he did for the Avengers film, it generated almost $100 million for that one film alone. But obviously, it spanned across a decade there. Now, obviously, if you're a movie studio, you typically pay them a basic salary in the which can go up to in the millions of dollars. But obviously, if you're an actress or an actor here, knowing that your film will do well, using performance based like in the box office will be to your advantage here. Now, whether Miss Johansson here has a case here is a big question here, because it's all about the agreement between Miss Johansson's side as well as Disney side. Was there a set agreement? If there's a contractual agreement, then Miss Johansson has a case there. But if there's not, Disney may play hardball here. Anyway, let's see here. I think there was a reply from the let's see here, from the attorney. Yeah, it's mentioned here. So it stated that it's no secret that Disney is releasing the film, in this case Black Widow, directly onto Disney Plus to increase subscribers and thereby boost the company's stock price. So obviously, Disney has different agendas because it's a big conglomerate company which focuses not just on entertainment, gaming, theme parks, products, and on and on. So increasing value for the company is important. Now, obviously, streaming services has been seen as a viable option to generate more revenue, but you have to subscribe to the company first. But if I were in as a regular consumer, if I want to watch films, should I have to pay a subscription fee just to be able to watch their films or even their catalogs? It would be like similar to way back in the cable days. You have to subscribe to a cable company to be able to watch a different channels here. Now in the internet age, it's the same all over again. And obviously, according to Disney, they're stating that there is no merit whatsoever to this filing, and that the lawsuit is especially sad and distressing in its callous disregard for the horrific and prolonged global effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Now, whether that's right to say because it's because of COVID. Now, they've already pushed the schedule. It was supposed to be released last year, and it was pushed to this year because obviously no one's going out, and actually the movie theaters are complaining with regards to how the movie studios have shifted or pivoted away from movie releases in the theaters. We're simply going directly to the streaming services here. Now, according to the company, they stated that the Disney has fully complied with Miss Johansson's contract, and furthermore, the release of Black Widow on Disney Plus with Premier Access has significantly enhanced her ability to earn additional compensation on top of the 20 million she has received to date. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, because think about it. If you're not a subscriber and you want to watch the film, you have to pay an additional fee, rather than if you want to, let's say, go to a theater. I think in the United States it costs around, is it less than $10 or less than 20, right, for that single film. And obviously the experience in a big cinema is totally different than watching it at home, unless you have a big home theater setup at your home, right? So question here is, who has more grounds here with regards to Miss Johansson or Disney company here? But if it all based, or one just have to look at the agreement here. If it in the agreement or in the contract of Miss Johansson, it stated if it's agreed upon that it should be released first in for theatrical release, so to generate maximum revenue, and if they were to break the agreement, so to speak, would there be penalties here? And if there's a stipulated penalty, let's say they did what they did now, how much is Disney supposed to pay? Is it in the tens of millions of dollars? Now, if there's no agreement, then Disney is off the hook, so to speak. Here now, whether that's fair or not. And what's interesting here, based on Miss Johansen's representative, they sought assurances that the film will be released way back in 2019. And then there were concerns that the Disney executives, the decision makers, will use the film to pad its streaming services. Now, obviously, Disney has been trying to promote its streaming services, Disney Plus, to compete with the likes of Peacock. Obviously, number one here is you have Netflix, and then you have Amazon Prime, to name a few. Now, whether that makes sense, who will win at the end? Again, at the end of the day, for Marvel, or for the Disney studios here, it make sense for them to cannibalize the opportunity for them to generate more revenue if possible here. Anyway, so obviously there have been extenuating circumstances because of the pandemic, what happened last year, but nonetheless, at the end of the day, it's a business, right? I think Johansson has a right to speak up, and if she has a case on it, then she should pursue all avenues on her part to protect her interest, because at the end of the day, if the film flops, it's not Disney who will be, what do you call this? Will be front and center here. It's Miss Johansson's face plastered all over, and if it does well, she will be blamed at the end of the day, not the company that made the film. Either way. Anyway, so question here is, how much was Miss Johansson paid here? Obviously, $20 million already a lot, but obviously, if you can get more based on the performance agreement that they mentioned, she could have earned more, even more than 100% more, in the tens of $20 million range here. So obviously, you don't want to miss any opportunity here. These are difficult times, right? We'll see what happens here. Anyway, speaking of another company, a beleaguered company in trouble or in the news lately, I don't know if you're familiar, Activision Blizzard, the makers of the popular game World of Warcraft, as well as Call of Duty here. So it's a very popular game. A lot of people playing it, in different consoles or in PC as well. Now, what's interesting, according to NBCnews.com, the workers at Activision walked out after sexual harassment. There was a sexual harassment lawsuit here. Now, obviously, this is a serious matter that no one should take lightly, whether it's true or not. Obviously, if you're the employee here, this is not a conducive way to work in in any organization. And if you're a company, you cannot take it lightly because it has severe repercussion. Obviously, it would hurt your reputation, and at the end of the day, and if worst case scenario, your gamers will think twice before patronizing your games in the future. But anyway, so it all started when employees at the video game company Activision Blizzard, as mentioned, staged a walkout here because of they want to demand better working conditions for women in particular and other marginalized group. Now, what's interesting here is the state of California sued the company. So it's not just the employees, it's the state of California that sued the company earlier last week, alleging widespread sexual harassment and discrimination. Now, obviously, if it's an isolated incident, the company might get away with it because maybe it's a anomaly rather than the norm. But if a lot of people speak up and reported the issue, then we may have a bigger case than we are seeing here. And according to those organizers who walked out, they mentioned that we believe that our values as employees are not being accurately reflected in the words of actions of our leadership. Now, obviously, Activision is a big multi-billion company that is beholden to their shareholders here. Now, if they don't perform, their performance bonuses will be significantly affected. Now, does it trickle down to those employees that it breeds unwanted action, so to speak? So here we are today. So question is, does it merit for the lawsuit? If it does, then this will have a severe repercussion for the company unless they pay out all of those aggrieved individuals or parties here. Anyway, according to the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing last week, which sued the company, as mentioned, alleging that the company has a pervasive frat boy culture, which obviously this is not good if you're a female in an organization, which you're being sexually harassed. And not only that, you are paid and promoted less versus your male counterparts. Now, obviously, in terms of gaming culture, does it mean the male is better at producing games compared or to female and so forth? Now, whether what's the reason behind the frat boy culture? Was this anomaly in a particular department, or is it widespread in the organization? And if it's widespread, this is not just I think top management would have seen this type of actions, and I'm sure there were some employees who complained, but were not entertained or even harassed to the point of why are you complaining, because this is part of your job and so forth. So what's interesting, another lawsuit was filed in terms of several former employees at that. So it's not just current, you have former employees who shared further allegations of harassment and discrimination on social media here. So the rumblings have been growing and growing slowly, so it puts credence that to the point that the state of California is taking a look at this to actually suing the company here. And there are dozens, so it's not just a few individuals, dozens of current employees who are in solidarity with women whose allegations were featured in the lawsuit here. Now, obviously, if you're the one harassed here, if the situation were to take light, obviously this would interrupt their personal lives, obviously being plastered all over the news, in the courtroom, if they were to find out who were those individuals and asking them personal questions, what happened there, and whether there's credence, whether there's proof and so forth. If it's just a few people complaining, but if it's widespread in all departments within the organization, this is pretty alarming if you look at it. But on the company side, they're stating that they value diversity. They're also stating they strive foster a workplace that offers inclusivity for everyone. Now, it's all good and dandy for a PR standpoint, but the question here, how come your employees are complaining? It's not just current employees, but former employees. Now, you may make excuses for former because maybe they were fired, they were let go, so they're trying to say bad things about the company. But for current employees to say that about the company, so there's two sides to a coin. But at the end of the day, it's all about the evidence here, what can be shown here. If there's proof that the company did allow such terrible culture within the company, to allow harassment for the female employees, which is not good and it's not conducive, right? Rather than promote harmonious work cooperation within the company to maximize productivity and maximize revenue, you're doing the complete opposite, which is not good. If you're a shareholder, would you like to invest in that company? Anyway, so they go on to state that there is no place in our company or industry or any industry for sexual misconduct of or harassment of any kind. Now, obviously, a company would say that, but the question, action speaks louder than words here. So, at the end of the day, what do you do to appease your employees? Because, saying sorry is not enough unless companies change their policy, do something actionable that employees can really appreciate. Then, until that time comes, obviously, the problem will always fester and continue to grow, which is not good. Now, the company is also saying that that it is considered distorted and in many cases false, according to the description of Blizzard's past. Now, if it's in the past, then were they able to resolve it? So how come it's still permeating currently today, which is not a good sign if you're a company here. So are they doing damage control here to mitigate the issue here, or is it bigger than what we're seeing here? Anyway, So obviously the walkout is just of signs of things to come. So we'll see what happens here. And what's interesting here, the walkout was drafted of a letter condemning the company's response to the lawsuit, which more than 3,100 current and former employees have signed. So a lot of people are, not what do you call this, are not happy with how the company is treating their employees, in this case the female ones. So in essence, what the organizers want are in four things. So first, obviously, is end mandatory arbitration clauses in employees contract. As the organizers say, they protect abusers to limit the ability of victims to seek restitution. So obviously, if you end mandatory arbitration, you have no way to go after those individuals who were abusive, or abusive of their power, or being or harassing female in this case, or vice versa, right? Another is, or second here, is to adopt policies to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion. Actually, the only way to see it, look at their roster here, look at their profile of their employees, then you can already see, is it really diversified as the companies led on to believe, or is it primarily a particular segment, whether it's Asians, Americans, Europeans, or whatnots here. Third is publish compensation data, promotion rates, and salary ranges for employees of all genders and ethnicity. I think it's more about transparency here, right? So how does one get promoted, get hired, and get this position, and so forth and so forth. So I think communication is another. I think that's where the company is terrible doing at that. The fact that a lot of the employees are talking about it, complaining about it, and saying, and then the company does nothing about it, does not bode well for them. And finally, hire a third party to audit the company's structure and human resources department and executives. I think these are all reasonable requests, or in this case, demands already, to have a third party looking in, a more objective, unbiased look, whether it's a I don't know, a third party auditor here, but rather than have internal management looking, because the internal management has not done their job to begin with, to only focus on protecting the interests of the company rather than the welfare of the employees who are supposed to help the company grow and succeed. So it's a hot issue, a very critical issue that, if this were to let it fester, does not bode well. And obviously, if other companies look at Activision, that you're allowing these types of behavior or bad behavior, then other companies will see, oh, maybe we can do this in other companies, which is a big no-no here. Anyway, so segueing to a more positive story. So as mentioned, we talked about earlier, starting a business, is it a great time to start a business now, or do you have to wait whether the what do you call this, the economy, what do you call this, bounces back with the pandemic that's ongoing, or the resurgence of the COVID-19 cases here? Now, what such company as Swimply, who thought of an idea because of a need to start a business of all things. So according to this, the article cnet.com, Swimply, the company, lets you swim in a stranger's pool, which is kind of weird, but we'll talk about it in a bit. It's less weird than you think. Well, for me, it looks weird because obviously in our country here, swimming pools is not commonplace here. So you have to really spend or go to a different location. Don't just go to your neighbor and, there's swimming pool access galore here. But anyway, yeah, so obviously think of this if you're in Austin, Texas. Obviously, if in the summer, temperature can reach as high as 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's pretty hot. Especially imagine in a pandemic, you're stuck at home, you have no option. So people are always looking for alternative ways to cool themselves. So one way, not just getting aircon, increasing your electric bills. Obviously, people are always looking for places to cool down, which is going swimming. But with the lockdown, with the restrictions and everything from last year, people are not allowed to do that. So here comes in a company that had thought is there a big demand for these services that they can start a business out of it. So the company Swimply is an Airbnb style for servicing swimming pools, which was founded back in summer of 2018. According to what do I call this? Yeah, so it's just like you step into a stranger's pool, backyard pool, and enjoy the cool breeze. Now, the company was co-founded by two persons, by Asher Weinberger and Bonim Laskin. Hope I'm pronouncing their names properly. Anyway, who met at a networking event wherein Weinberger hosted an event for entrepreneurs in New York City. And then Laskin was a young college student back then, pitched to Weinberger the idea of monetizing home swimming pools. So they pursued the idea by looking at Google Earth for houses with swimming pools and knocking on doors if people would be willing to rent it out. Now, obviously, if you're a homeowner, now obviously there's risk and reward, but obviously in a pandemic, if you can earn an extra income, why not, right? There's no harm to it. So what they did was create a simple website and watched thousands of people visit Strangers Pool in just a few weeks. So there was a demand for those services, which is kind of weird because people are, the homeowners are in their houses, but other people, strangers, are swimming in your backyard. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe they don't care as long as they get the enjoyment of cooling down in the hot summer breeze. Anyway, what's interesting here, the company is now available in all 50 US states, as well as in Canada and in Australia as well. So they've been hosting 500,000 users and about 13,000 pools. So that's a lot of houses with pools. So obviously, it only works for for uh, for for countries like that, for US and Canada and Australia, but for countries like us in the Philippines, it's not always the case because having your own house is one thing already. Being able to afford to build a pool in your own house, it's more on luxury rather than a basic need here, and you need to go to a resort to provincial areas to be able to access that, being able to swim. Anyway, obviously, there are risks associated if you wanted to invest on businesses like this. But what's interesting here, just like Airbnb, right? If there's a need, if you can offer monetary value to your consumers, in this case, to people who are dying to go out, whether it's your neighbor's house or somewhere near your house, there's always going to be an opportunity here. Now, what's interesting here, the pandemic brought about a huge wave of financial uncertainty, which what happened last year, right? But still, the company still experienced close to 5,000% growth year of year from 2019 to 2020. So, despite that, now they turned profitable and attracted even more venture capitalists to invest in their company so that they can expand the business model here. Whether they could do that in other regions would be interesting there. Anyway, so they raised Series A a few months for as much as $10 million. So that's not chump change here, right? Anyway, so the question here is there a need, and they can provide that need and they can connect the two, then you have a business out here. But obviously the question here is it easy to, should you pursue this venture? Now obviously in different parts of the world, if you have access, if it's more affordable than rather than going to a swimming pool in a university or in a actual facility that you are limited to go there, then if it's more cost effective, then it makes sense, even though it looks weird that you're in someone's houses when you want to use the facility there. Anyway, so what's interesting here, they offer you several amenities. So typical like an Airbnb, you have hair dryer, TV or washers, and you have lots of toys that you could use so you can enjoy yourself when you're swimming or inside the pool here. The question is, can you bring kids along? I don't think so, but maybe in their case they are allowed to. But anyway, so obviously the key here is if there's a need for those services, you know, grab the opportunity here. And if the business is growing, continue leveraging it. And obviously, what's the downside of doing this? Now, if I'm a homeowner, obviously there may be a risk of, people ruining or damaging your properties. So obviously you have to protect yourself in terms of having insurance coverage in your homes. In particular, the app, I think Airbnb has that also. So not knowing who those people are actually, using your pool here. Can you interact with them and so forth? It would be weird. Anyway, so it would be interesting, if we were able to have that here. And what's interesting, the company is going beyond not just pools. So they're going to expand into home gyms, home theaters, and private tennis courts, and even music studios here. So it's more likely it's becoming more Airbnb. So you're renting the entire home already here with different features there. So is it a good business for for our region here? Maybe not. Anyway, for our next story in terms of technology, so I think we've discussed it in previous discussion regarding, Samsung is still the number one smartphone maker in the world. Number two now is Xiaomi. Number three is Apple, right? Now, even though the pandemic is still ongoing, demands for smartphone are still ongoing, right? Now, what's interesting here, according to TechSpat.com, even though Samsung is still the leading global smartphone maker or market, despite quarterly decline. So we'll take a closer look. So what could be the reason behind the decline here? Anyway, what the heck is this? Wait. There you go. So as you can see here, they're a popular. Yeah. So according to company Counterpoint Research, they mentioned that the global smartphone only grew by 90% compared to last year, around 329 million. One would think that's a lot, but compared that to previous quarters and previous years, that's significantly higher. So what's interesting, the global smartphone shipments collectively fell by as much as 7% quarter over quarter here. So let's see here. Here, there you go. So you can see, take a closer look there. So obviously, from the first here, you can see in what year is this? 2015, right? Quarter two, it had 350 million units sold for that particular period, and it grew the following year all the way to 2017, and then it plateaued around 2018, right? And then there was a decline in 2019. So this was even pre-pandemic. Now, obviously, this accelerated the decline during the pandemic, and now it's recovering, but it's not getting pre-pandemic levels anymore. So there has been a slippage in terms of demand for what do you call this, for smartphones here. But what's interesting here is that, which companies are doing well and which are declining here. So you can take a closer look here. So at the bottom here, you can see the dark blue. This represents the company Samsung. So they're still they own majority chunk of the market share here, but it's been declining slightly. Even during last year, their sales were still they were declining already below 70 million, right? So it's almost 20 million difference there. And the only company that did really well was, if you look at it, the orange graph here is the Xiaomi company, which had been steadily growing and has even doubled their growth in terms of production here. Now you have Apple here, on the other hand, has been steadily growing, but obviously they have a different market strategy compared to Xiaomi, which is a more affordable smartphone product, compared to Apple, which is considered premium, so to speak. And then you also have other smartphone makers, Oppo and Vivo, and you can see that even other smartphone makers, their sales have been declining steeply. So meaning, should this be a concern for those smartphone makers? Because at the end of the day, is the demand still growing, or has it reached a tipping point that has it plateaued? I think that's why several companies, like in the case of Apple, has been looking for several ways how to diversify their portfolio, not just focusing on smartphone making. They also have laptops, desktops, and other peripherals that they would sell to the consumer, and obviously focusing on the application side or the software side with regards to the Apple App Store, charging the the developers for 30% fee, so I think they're seeing the trend here. They'd like to have a stronger hold in their market in the United States, but you know it comes to a point that the sales will decline. The question is, what would the company in the likes of Samsung and Apple do in their case? Now, I think Samsung is not just a smartphone maker here. They're also makers of great television, in this case LED TV, or even do they have OLED? I think they have OLED. I'm not sure. And also they have other businesses here. So Samsung is a much bigger company with the other investments in other industries as well. So is it going to decline anytime soon, or is it going to be a slow decline here unless they find a better, or unless they can innovate their product, right? I think which what they're trying. But in terms of my experience here, right? I own a Samsung S21, right? Ultra, and the innovation is only increment, not similar to decades past where there were leaps and bounds of improvement from a Nokia phone to a iPhone to a Samsung S series phone. There were leaps and bounds decades ago, but now it's just micro increments here. Better screen, whether it's from LED to LCD to OLED, and then a slightly bump in processing, storage, and so forth, right? But at the end of the day, it was not going to be any significant improvements in terms of technology. I think Samsung tried to offer the Z Fold, right? A foldable phone, which is interesting in a sense, but it's way too expensive. At least they can bring down the price to where the S series or the Apple phones are in terms of its price range. It's way too expensive. So in terms of tier, there's what do you call this? Luxury and uber luxury, if there's such a thing. Anyway. Next, we have in terms of technology, again, Tesla, the company, the makers of electric vehicles, right? Obviously, if you own an electric vehicle, you need it to be charged by a charger of sorts. Now, in the case of Tesla, they also produce, not necessarily produce, but they also generate electricity by charging, not necessarily, they store electricity in their, what they call a Megapack, so that you could use it similar to how a generator works. Instead of using fuel to power the generator, it's using electricity here. Anyway, according to Engadget.com, a Tesla Megapack caught fire at the Victorian Big Factory battery facility in Australia. So obviously Australia is a big adopter of renewable energy, trying to shift away from fossil fuel here, which is not good for the environment. But obviously the technology hasn't been, I wouldn't say fully formed, but there are still risks involved. Like in this case, imagine if your car, which is powered by a battery, and then it suddenly explodes. So imagine what happened, I think years back, with a Samsung Galaxy Note, right? They recently introduced that, and then a person was carrying it in the airplane, and then it caught fire all of a sudden. Now that was easily addressed, but if that were to happen inside a car, that could be catastrophic here. But in this case, it's just a Megapack for storing electricity here. But anyway, a 13-ton Tesla Megapack caught fire at the battery storage facility, as mentioned, in Australia. So obviously it caught fire. Actually, they had to call in regional fire service to fight the fire and go to, what's the site here? Geelong, Victoria. I hope I'm pronouncing it. Anyway, so what's interesting here, how severe was the fire? They had to evacuate the entire area here. Now, obviously, thank goodness there were no injuries that occurred there. But what's interesting here, because of the fire, a warning of toxic smoke has been issued in the nearby area in Batesford, Belpost Hill, as well as Lovely Banks and Murabul areas. So meaning the fire that, the fire it exhausts, or the toxic that it generates from the fire can be deadly. And obviously, containing that fire is important here, because imagine if it was a big widespread fire, could be dangerous, and no one wants significant fatalities here. And obviously the technology is still considered new per se. So understanding what the reason here, I think the company is trying to find out now as to what led to the fire here, and hopefully they can solve that issue quickly, sooner rather than later. And even to the point that residents were warned to stay indoors, close the windows and vents and fireplaces, and bring pets inside. So that's how bad that it could be. So imagine it was just a small scale incident, and if it were to turn into a big fire, who knows what could have happened there. But thankfully that did not happen regardless. But what's interesting here is that the Victorian big battery site is housing a 300 or to 450 megawatt battery storage facility. Now, obviously, the government, this is one of the government's goal to shift to 50% renewable energy by end of 2030, which is a big task if you think about it. Now, obviously, in terms of renewable energy, you have electricity, like what Tesla is offering. You have solar, you have hydro, you have wind. So I think if more countries are utilizing renewable source of energy, then our countries are all for it, our environment is all for it, and our world is all for it here. Anyway, so if it's successful, they're looking at a new Neon. I don't know if it's called Neon, and Tesla's 100 to 129 megawatt battery farm in Hornsdale, South Australia here. So obviously the advantage here is that it could have millions of savings for consumers as well as early adopters here. So we'll take a closer look here, what happens in the future. Hopefully our country can also develop something to that effect. I think there were plans to build a hydro plant here in our country here, but obviously we need to expand here, not just rely on fossil fuel here. Now there were plans of rejuvenating the nuclear power plant, which is a terrible idea. We just have to look at the past history on Chernobyl and then Fukushima as a great example, because if those first-rate countries, developed countries, encounter those difficulties, what more in our current state here? Because it only takes one small mistake to have a catastrophic event, and the disaster is still looming up to the present. Now, thankfully for Japan, they're able to mitigate it as much as they can, but the entire area has been cordoned off because the radiation will stay there for, I think it's thousands of years. So it cannot be inhabited in the very near future, even in Chernobyl still, right? So we need to be cautious in terms of which technology we adopt. But obviously, nuclear power is somewhat enticing because of the immense power that it can generate for the community here as well as the country as well. Anyway, for our last story, so in terms of sports here, now obviously we've talked about who are the highest paid athletes in the world, how they generate their income in terms of playing the sports that they play. In this case, we'll focus more on Formula 1 if you're into racing here. So one of my favorite drivers of all time is Ayrton Senna, who passed away in an accident. Now the current F1 drivers is Lewis Hamilton. Anyway, so what's interesting here, how much earnings they generate from driving their respective companies, as well as where they generate their extra income in terms of endorsement deal. Now, according to Forbes.com, Formula One's highest paid drivers or athletes has a clash between Hamilton and Verstappen, which extends to their bank account. So let's take a closer look here. Anyway, so what's interesting here, obviously Lewis Hamilton is one of the best drivers currently today, is earning a pretty high sum of money, similar or even more compared to with the likes of LeBron James, uh, Lionel Messi, or even Ronaldo here. Now, what's interesting is if we were to take a look in terms of their earnings, some of the F1 drivers, at the top 10, highest earnings, are projected to earn as much as 200, a little over $200 million. But what's interesting, if you look at the NBA, if you look at the salary of Stephen Curry alone, his extension, which was signed earlier this week or last week, I forgot. His extension would be in the same amount or even more for the next 3 or 4 years. So he will be staying with the Golden State for some time here. Anyway, so let's take a closer look in terms of their earnings here. So obviously, earning a substantial amount, you want to maximize your earnings, especially whether you're Lewis Hamilton or Michael Schumacher or whoever you are. Now, what's interesting here, even though he's the number one F1 driver in the world, currently he drives for Mercedes, the company. His base salary, as you can see here, is around 55, which is considered a lot, right? But what's interesting here is that in terms of off the court or off track earnings is even higher. Now, what would think that you would leverage your notoriety or popularity by partnering with several companies here to increase your income, so to speak. But that's not the case for other drivers here, which you will see in a little bit. So let's take a look here. So here we have number 2, Max Verstappen, who's a driver for Red Bull Racing here. So what's interesting here, his base salary is slightly lower. Now, obviously, he's no Lewis Hamilton, but he's still being paid millions of dollars to drive for Red Bull here. But in terms of off-track earnings, it's slightly less than Lewis Hamilton, a little over 42 million here. But if we were to scroll down with the rest of the, what do you call this? The rest of the list here, you can see here we have Fernando Alonso, who's earning a base salary of 25 million, but no off-track earnings here, meaning they are only tied to the company that they're driving here. In this case, for Alpine company. So the downside of being an F1 driver is you may be paid a lot in terms of your expertise here, but you're asked a lot to focus primarily on the task at hand, which is drive to the best of your ability so that you will not be distracted in doing other stuff, so to speak. Now, obviously, in the case of Hamilton here, it's an exception rather than the rule. And if you notice here, even though Hamilton earns 55 million, right? If you subtract that with his total earnings, so 12 million, is it 12 million? 7 million. Yeah, 7 million came off other earnings in terms of bonuses and other earnings here. And in terms of being able to generate, endorsement here, if we go down the list here, so you have Sergio Perez, who's also for Red Bull. In terms of bonuses, that's majority of his earning compared to his base salary. And you also have Sebastian Vettel here, or Vettel. In terms of salary, that's his entire earnings. No additional off-track earnings or bonuses and so forth. So you can see down the list here, you have Charles Leclerc for Ferrari, and then Valtteri Bottas is the same. Then you have Ricciardo is the same. So they're not paid a lot compared to their contemporaries, and being able to earn more in terms of endorsement deals, they are limited also there. Now, whether that's good or bad, obviously it's a case-to-case basis. They're still millionaire, right? But if you're a driver, you're always looking for a better opportunity to maximize your notoriety, like we discussed last time with regards to, like in the case of Mr. Giannis Antetokounmpo, being a champion in the NBA provides a lot of credibility in a sense, right? So a lot of companies would like to attach themselves, their brand names, to your popularity, so to speak here. Now, obviously, as an F1, driving an F1 vehicle is no easy task since it's a very taxing. You have to be an athlete, so to speak, in terms of cornering, in terms of the G's that you encounter in making tight corners at high speeds, 100 miles per hour. So kudos to them. So earning a lot is always at the back of your mind if you can leverage it. And it is what it is here. So it depends on the sports that you are playing in, whether it's in soccer, basketball, football, American, or soccer, and tennis, or any other sports here. Anyway, so I think that concludes our discussion for today. Thanks again for watching. So for more business news, stay here at Business Focus Live. Also, if you're interested to check out the articles that we discussed today, I leave the link in the description below. And always, if you're new to the channel, if you enjoy these types of content, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, or you can check out my other videos as well. So we have a business update. You can check it out on Wednesdays. We also have guides, tutorials, and tips if you're interested in analytics, so do check that out as well. And if you like long format discussions, we have biz talks as well. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching again. I'll see you again next week, same time, same channel. Take care.